Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana expected to deliver his budget speech tomorrow. Now, this comes as almost 8 million individuals were unemployed in the fourth quarter of last year, up from the previous quarter. And it also comes as pressure on the economy continues, and he will have to also provide a detailed plan on this year's spending, as well as proposals for revenue collection to help fund government programs. Is this all possible? Let's speak to Ernie Lai King, One Road Consulting MD. Thank you so much for your time. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana continues to have pressure on his shoulders. I mean, projecting significant revenue shortfalls for this year and the next. What do you believe, though, are the primary factors that are contributing to the shortfall?
How are you, Bangiwe? Bangiwe, the Minister of Finance is not a miracle maker. He has to rely on other ministers and other portfolios to assist him in making this a successful budget. I'll go through what I think are the 6 major issues for a successful budget, but we unfortunately appear to lack a clear, cohesive economic policy. So government, business and labor, we are all in the same boat, but we all seem to live in different universes and talk past one another. So we appear to be a little bit of a dysfunctional family, perhaps because the head of the family is indecisive and not very effective. So in order to have a successful budget, I think there are 6 fundamental objectives. He needs to achieve a higher rate of economic growth, and that's going to be very difficult for reasons that I'll go into in greater detail in a second. He needs to increase tax collection without causing a barrier to achieving the higher rate of economic growth. He needs to control the expenditure and manage the public sector wage bill, but in an election year, it's a difficult task. He needs to stabilize and reduce national debt, and he must reconfigure the state-owned enterprises. Now, it's a very bad environment in which to try and raise taxes, because business is looking outside of South Africa, because our economy is shrinking, and our forever declining rand makes us all poorer every year, irrespective of how we work. So if we go to how can he achieve a higher rate of economic growth, it's got a big problem and a very enviable task, because there's no power, there's no rail, the roads are breaking down because there's no rail, the ports are suboptimal, we all know the problem at the ports, so we have very limited scope for economic growth because of that. And we have, of course, the ever-present problem of endemic corruption. Now, coming to stabilizing and reducing debt, our debt to GDP officially is over 70%. I think it's more likely over 80% at the moment. The tipping point for developing countries, I think most economists will tell you that the tipping point for a debt for a sovereign debt crisis is when your debt to GDP exceeds 75%. So I think we're over 80%.
Pardon me for coming in there, but you mentioned something at the beginning of this which is quite important, and that is coherence, because it's always something that we always talk about when it comes to various issues as far as departments are concerned, to say don't speak past each other, speak with one voice because you're one government. But how much of a risk does this pose then, for his own interventions that he will then propose, especially when you look at what a lot of people are concerned about, and you just mentioned it, indecision when it comes to some of the key issues, but at the same time, this issue of speaking in different voices?
Well, the Minister of Finance now has to work within his portfolio of trying to reconfigure state-owned enterprises, but of course the Department of Public Enterprises and the Minister of Public Enterprises, he's not, I'm sorry to say, doing a particularly good job. Our state-owned enterprises, wherever you look, whether it be Transnet, PRASA, Eskom, they're all insolvent or virtually insolvent and all doing very badly. Now, he now has to try and coordinate and reconfigure state-owned enterprises and at the same time try to achieve a higher rate of economic growth. But he faces the problems where none of our SOEs are working. We can't have a higher economic growth rate if we have no power, no rail, no roads, and no ports. So this coherence is extremely important, but I don't think it's present.
And South Africans obviously around this time also a bit nervous, wondering if tax increases are inevitable, or are there any alternatives?
The alternative is higher borrowings, because as far as our tax base is concerned, it's very, very thin. Bangiwe, it's a very, very thin tax base. There's a lot of unemployment, and in that very thin tax base, probably 2% of that tax base is paying 70% or 80% of the tax bill. So there's very little room in which the minister can move to increase taxes. He can try to increase VAT. It's an election year, so that's probably a no-no. He's so far been resistant to increasing corporate tax rates and the maximum marginal rate of tax, because we have such a thin tax base. So the next alternative is he has to borrow more, which, because of our debt to GDP being over 70%, probably over 80%, is going to be very difficult for him.
And I know that, this issue comes up over time, but also you are saying that right now, and we all are alive to that fact, that the public sector wage bill issue is complicated now because of the election, but it's not a new thing. We've been hearing about it over time. Is it something that government can really do something about once and for all, even outside of an election year?
Very difficult. Very, very difficult. The unions will push back very, very heavily. The efficiency within the public sector, as far as the number of employees that you have and versus the bang that you're getting for your buck, we probably find that it's not a particularly good ratio. So managing that public sector bill, that public sector bill over the years has been growing and growing and growing. It's going to be very hard, very difficult to bring it down. It's going to be very hard to keep it under control. So he has a very difficult task.
Ernie, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And let's see then how he juggles all these balls tomorrow. And we see if, in fact, a lot of people will then be impressed or will continue to decry some of, the interventions that might be proposed there. But thank you so much for your insights.